Hey everyone, it's Mrs. Cantrell with the next chapter of Goat in the Garden. If you remember the last chapter, Mandy and James had this great idea for Lydia to start selling her goat milk. And then that way she could have an extra income. And so they got it all started, and Lydia was even on board with that idea. So they got it started. And now Lydia had the idea that maybe Mandy would like to take one of the baby goats and enter it in the fair. So the next chapter is chapter 9. And here's our clue at the beginning. It just looks like a big tent. So let's see what happens in chapter 9. I know. Why don't we sell milk and cheese at the fair as well? Mandy exclaimed. She and James were spreading fresh straw in the goats' pens the following day. It seemed the obvious next step in raising Lydia's profits. Great idea, James agreed. I'm not so sure, Lydia protested. There'll be a big crowd at the fair. I'm not quite used to all of those people. But Mandy and James gradually convinced her. It's a real farm show, Mandy said. There are animals and the produce competitions and some good local crafts. My grandfather's entering his leeks as well. There's a big flower tent, too. It's too good a chance to miss, James insisted. Very well, Lydia agreed. A milk and cheese stand. Great! We'll help, of course, Mandy and James cried. But most of Mandy's week went into feeding Monty the best fruits and greens from the supermarket supply and turning him out regularly onto the best spring pasture. The fair was only days away, and she could think of little else. She groomed, trained, and pampered Monty. She put a mineral lick in his pen to tone him up. She provided bucketfuls of fresh spring water. You, she told Monty, are going to be the best turned out goat for miles around. He was a dark-faced goat with a shiny, alert eyes. The bloom on his black coat was lovely. No trace of coarse, dry winter hair was left, and everything about him, from well-trimmed hooves to shiny, wet nose, showed he was in tip-top condition. You'll make Houdini jealous, showering young Monty with all this attention, Lydia warned. Mandy grinned. She knew Lydia still had a soft spot for the wicked wanderer. Houdini stood at a haughty distance from them in the newly fenced field. Monty, free at last from Mandy's grooming comb, ran and frisked in the long grass. From a distance, Mandy could admire his good points. The judges at the fair would be looking for a strong back, depth of chest, fine legs. Do you think he has a chance of winning? Mandy asked. Lydia eyed him shrewdly. He's a good little goat, was all she was prepared to say. They went back up to the farm together to work in the dairy. There was milk to be put in cartons, and an experiment in making soft cheese for the produce stand. We still have to check the special health regulations, Lydia said, and I must make sure of the arrangements to transport the milk and cheese down to the fairgrounds when Saturday comes. Did Ernie Bell manage to borrow a van for the day? Mandy asked. Yes, and he tells me he's made a large trestle table for the stand. Lydia bustled about, flushed and nervous. I must say, still not looking forward to the day, she admitted, shaking her head. It's the only trestle table I've ever seen with dovetail joints, Dr. Adam commented as he helped unload the beautifully made piece at the fairgrounds on Friday night. Yes, well, when I do a job, I like to do it properly, Ernie said, secretly pleased. Tell Miss Fawcett I'll be up early tomorrow morning with the van, he told Mandy. 7 o'clock? She asked. She knew what he meant by early. On the dot, Ernie said. We have a lot of setting up to do. Mandy looked back and waved as she left the fairgrounds. There were trailers unloading bales of straw and tents half erected. Her grandmother was already organizing the women's club refreshment tent, and her grandfather was setting out neat labels for the vegetable section. This would be a great event, a farm show that attracted farmers from this valley and the next. With its huge tents, its show rings, its cross-country race, the flower competitions, excitement was already building up. Mandy got the first real flutterings of nerves as she turned and rode off. She rode up to High Cross to put the finishing touches on Monty and to help with the evening milking. The sun, low on the horizon, cast long, warm shadows on the gray farmhouse. The windows and doors all stood open. Mandy could see Lydia running from house to barn and back across to the cool house with great buckets of creamy milk. Her face, glowing in the sun, opened up into a smile when she saw Mandy. "Come here," she beckoned. She took Mandy out into the field. Houdini was showing off in front of the female goats. He pranced up and down along the top wall. His audience gazed spellbound at his tricks. He skipped to the wall top to perform a fine tightrope walking act without dislodging a single stone. "Of course, he's still a little mad about the new fence," Lydia explained as Houdini butted his head against the chain-link enclosure. "It cramps his style, I think you'd say." "But even Houdini can't climb that," Mandy laughed. "Knock wood." Lydia dashed for the nearest fence post. "But where's Monty?" "Ah," Lydia paused awkwardly. "We have a bit of a problem there." And again she beckoned Mandy, this time out of the field and into the barn. "I thought I'd better put Monty in here, out of harm's way until you came," she explained. Then she pointed to a very sorry sight. Monty stood dejected in his pen. His bright coat, his lovely bright coat, was covered from head to foot in brown, matted, foul-smelling, dried-out manure. He looked sorrowfully at Mandy and gave her a feeble bleat. "What happened?" Mandy was shocked. Was this the goat she was supposed to take to the fair tomorrow? "Houdini, that's what happened," Lydia apologized. "I warned you he'd get jealous. Well, he caught poor little Monty when my back was turned for just a second as I'd finished milking this morning. I was letting the herd out to pasture. He must have got to Monty in the yard and quartered him straight into the manure heap. No mercy, you see. Just a quick shove to teach him who's boss." "Oh!" Mandy stood and shook her head. "Bit of a mess, isn't he?" And feeling very sorry for himself. Mandy talked nicely to Monty until he stopped bleating. She considered several cleanup tactics: a hose down, buckets of soapy water. But goats hate being wet and can sulk for days. She didn't want Monty trailing down to the show looking miserable. That would spoil any chance they had of winning a prize. There was no way around it. Out came the grooming comb. Carefully, strand by strand, she untangled the horrid, smelly mess. 2 hours later, he was clean as any model in a shampoo ad. Mandy's arm felt as if they were about to drop off, but Monty was clean. Head up, frisky, graceful little Monty, as good as new. "Well done," Lydia nodded. Monty breathed out noisily. "Just keep him away from Houdini for the night, will you?" she said. She rode home, went straight to bed, and fell into an exhausted sleep. But she was up with the dawn, racing to draw back the curtains to check the sky. Would it be fine for the fair? Would it rain and spoil everything? A few clouds drifted across a mainly blue sky, and there had been a shower during the night. The ground was still damp, but Mandy scrambled into clean shorts and a t-shirt, daring the weather to be anything but sunny. Then she had her chores to do at Animal Ark in double time, and help with 2 emergencies before the clinic opened. "Go on," her mom said, glancing at the clock. "Simon's due any minute. We can cope here if you want to get up to High Cross. Mandy was out the door and halfway out the driveway before her mother finished the sentence. Ernie was already there, loading milk and cheese into the borrowed van. He had hired a refrigerating unit from a butcher friend and was showing Lydia how it would keep the produce cool throughout the day. She smiled like a child at Christmas. Wonderful! She repeated over and over. She kept on running back into the house for her accounts book, her loose change, her nature's best signs, her jacket in case it rained. For a moment, Lydia thought she might even change her mind completely. It was a big day for Lydia. This would be the first time she'd been down from High Cross to sell her milk and meet her customers. Come on, Mandy said. There's no need to worry. But Lydia looked doubtful. I'm sure you could manage without me, she protested. Why don't I just stay here to mind Houdini and the rest? Ernie sat in the driver's seat and shook his head. Don't be crazy, he said. We need you. You're the goat lady, remember? Something about his tone of voice made Lydia pull herself together. She swallowed hard and nodded. Right, then we're all set. She got into the van and spoke to Mandy before she closed the door. Remember to check Houdini one last time before you leave. Mandy nodded and waved as the red van moved off down the road, full to the brim with nature's best produce. There was Monty to see to, a final brush, a quick polish of the hoofs, a comb of the straggly beard. Then her dad drove up to see if she was ready. It was 10:30, and he was already in his jogging suit for the start of the race at 11:15. Nervous? He asked Mandy, who led Monty carefully up the ramp into the truck. Yes, she said. Are you? Yes. Let's go then. I have to meet James in 15 minutes. Mandy even remembered to see that Houdini was safe in the top field with the other goats before they drove off. She gave him an apple through the wire fence. That's right. Good boy. Houdini caught sight of the well-groomed little Monty peering out of the back of the truck. He snickered with envy from behind his prison wall. Poor old Houdini. Mandy felt genuinely sorry. Is he feeling left out? Dr. Adam asked as they drove off. She nodded. It's a shame. Mandy turned and saw Houdini glaring angrily at the disappearing truck. Uh-oh. You think Houdini's gonna be up to one of his stunts? But village life in all its splendor greeted them at the show field behind the church, and Mandy was instantly caught up in it. She forgot Houdini and concentrated on Monty, taking him from the truck and tethering him alongside the other goats. Fawn Toggenburgs, white Sonnens, other black and white Alpines, all splendidly turned out and dapper. Mandy's heart sank a bit, but she sweet-talked Monty into staying put on his running tether. Now, Monty, it's not going to rain on you, and there's plenty of juicy grass within reach. Just stay here and be a good boy. She checked the chain one last time. Other owners were making last-minute preparations too, but many were wandering off across the show ring to glance at other events before the judging began. Confident there would be no trouble, Mandy left the animal compound and went off to the main arena with its huge tent and all the craft and produce stands. It was 11:15, time for the start of the cross-country race. As her dad's official trainer, it was her duty to cheer him on. Mandy's grandmother was doing great business at the cake stand, and her grandfather was pouring out cups of hot tea. Behind them, the garden experts were carrying their prize exhibits into the flower tent. Huge begonias and prize roses, arrangements of lilies, ferns, and bottles. Mandy caught sight of Sam Western showing off as usual about his unique type of rose, explaining its advantages to anyone who would listen. I've called it Cream Surprise, he said, disappearing inside the tent with it as if it were an endangered species. Outside, there was a nice bustling crowd around the craft and produce stands. A man was sitting cross-legged making willow baskets in the traditional method, and Mandy was astonished to learn that he was blind. There was a corn husk doll, stand, patchwork quilt stands, and there, extra busy and doing great business, was the High Cross Farm produce stand, nature's best. Nandy gave Lydia and Ernie a wave, met up with an excited James, and scooted off to the far side of the arena where the brass band had just finished and the racers were lining up for the start. Mandy and James, already hot and sticky under the cloudless sky, gave Dr. Adams a thumbs up. "He looks very lean and fit," James said, sounding surprised. "James said you look lean and fit," she yelled, and her dad grinned and gave back a cheery thumbs up. "And so he ought to," she said to James, "after all the training I've put into this." "Here's your mom," James said, and the three of them stood at the starting line, ready to yell when the gun went off. "Ready, set," the starter shouted and fired his pistol. The gaggle of men and women, young and old, scrawny and stocky, plus a few children, set off up the field. The trio from Animal Ark watched them run over the road and began to spread out up the gentle slopes of the gray and green hillside. Soon they were practically out of sight. They looked like colorful little ants on a quick march up an impossible hill. "Let's have a cup of tea," Dr. Emily suggested, "before the judging." She looked at Mandy. "Come on, it'll calm your nerves." But Mandy only lasted 2 minutes in the tea tent before she was back off to the animal compound, untethering Monty and fussing with him as the judges made their slow progress toward them. She combed him for the 20th time that morning and tweaked his beard into perfect shape. Monty bore it all like a veteran. That means like he was used to it, and he's done this many times before. But he never has he? The judges were a small man in a natty tweed hat and jacket, and a tall gray-haired woman in a white coat. When their turn came at last, Mandy led Monty out into the center of the little judging circle. The tweedy man stood sideways in front, then took position at Monty's back end. He checked boxes on a sheet. The gray-haired woman looked intently in Monty's mouth, checked his ears, felt the texture of his coat. "Good feet," Mandy heard her say to her fellow judge. "Would you walk him for us?" Mandy clicked her tongue and walked Monty along. He held his head high and lifted his feet daintily. He seemed to know that he was on show. There was a spring in his stride and a knowing look in his eye. "Good boy, Monty," Mandy breathed. The judges confirmed. They checked more boxes. The serious lady smiled. "Thank you very much," she said, and they moved on to the next competitor. And here are the judges when they're looking at Monty. "Sounds like he did a good job. Do you think they can win?" Mandy held her breath. She gave Monty a quick hug. "Well done," she said, for he behaved like the perfect goat. "Well?" James came up and asked impatiently. "I don't know. We'll have to wait." In the distance, the colorful runners were scrambling back down the hillside, one and two at a time, like a string of bright beads. The race was in its final stages, and Mandy was torn between running over to cheer for her dad in the final leg or staying put for the judge's verdict on Monty. The wait was endless as the judges went from goat to goat, and the racers got nearer and nearer. "Hey, your dad's near the front! There in the blue!" James yelled. He ran over to the finishing line for a better view, but Mandy couldn't leave Monty. He skipped and skittered on the end of the tether. She put an arm on his neck. The judges were coming back. The Tweety man was taking rosettes out of his pocket, yellow, red, and blue. The woman was announcing the winners. "Third prize, Pearl Barley," she said loud and clear. The pure Toggenburg goat and its proud owner stepped up to receive the yellow rosette. "Second prize, Old Moor." Mandy bit her lip. She could barely bear to look. The red rosette was pinned to the collar of a lovely cream-colored salmon with pink ears and nose. The goat owner grinned from ear to ear. "And first prize, for a really lovely little goat," the lady announced, pausing for breath. "Monty, from High Cross Farm." There was a burst of applause and smiling faces. Monty moved beside Mandy at a sprightly pace. They went up to the judges to receive his blue rosette. There was shaking of hands and warm compliments. Well done! Everyone crowded around with their congratulations. Mandy flung her arms around Monty and kissed him. She hugged the silky blue rosette to her chest. Still, she could hardly believe it. In a daze, she returned Monty to his tether. Wait here, she told him. Be a good boy. I have to go and tell the others. The crowd roared as she charged across the arena, but not for her. The cross-country racers were in the final sprint. She held up her blue rosette. That means like a blue ribbon. Come on, Dad, you can do it. She waved and yelled frantically, along with James and her mother. Dr. Adams put his shoulders back and lengthened his stride. He was fourth. He passed one, then two runners whose legs had begun to go. He gritted his teeth. The leaders' chests were heaving in spite of the cheers, but Dr. Adam pressed forward, pushing for the finishing tape. He was just behind the leader, the runner in black. 1 yard, 1.5 yards behind. They both fell over the tape into a mighty cheer. Second! Dr. Adam was second. He bent double, clutching the red rosette. Dad! Dad! Mandy rushed forward. We won! Monty and I won! She waved the fluttering blue rosette in front of him. Her father looked up and grinned. He grabbed her around the waist, lifted her off her feet, and swung her around. He made a yell like a Scottish dancer, and James and Dr. Emily joined in their little jig of victory. Let's go and tell Lydia, Mandy said, breathless with delight. She pushed through the crowd to reach the stand and thrust the blue rosette into Lydia's hands. It's yours, she said. Monty was absolutely brilliant. Lydia beamed. So Monty did it after all. She hugged Mandy. Good job. Well done, you two. She hung the blue rosette where it could be seen on the high cross stand. We've earned more than 136 pounds, she said proudly, and people have been so kind. She never knew she was so famous with her goats tucked up on the hill, Ernie said, and folks have put in regular orders for the cheese. They say they swear by goat milk and cheese, but up till now, it's been hard to get hold of. A real success, Dr. Emily said, her face sharing everyone's delight. Record profits for the farm, rosettes everywhere, and everybody happy. A perfect day, Mandy agreed. Wow, what a great ending. So, Mandy won first place with Monty, and her dad came in second place in the run that he's been training so hard for. There's only one more chapter to the book. Chapter 10, and the only hint is these flowers, and there's another ribbon beside it, or what they call a rosette. You'll have to join in next time to find out what happens at the very end of Goat in the Garden.